In this world, magic is an innate power wielded by demons, essentially the dark counterpart to human blessings. The gap is massive, since a single basic attack from a demon is enough to completely neutralize a protagonist. Kang steps onto the battlefield, knowing that even with the Blade God's blessing, victory is a long shot, since in the original game, taking down Demonkin required an entire party. These things were designed as raid bosses, yet he's standing here alone, making this a total suicide mission. He's crossed the point of no return, and Chloe won't be back with reinforcements for another 10 minutes. The demon looms over him, a terrifying mass of dark energy and sharp grins. He only has 40 seconds to cut down this monster, and he doesn't hesitate. Drawing his sashimi knives, he feels a strange surge of relief as his mental grade spikes. The system recalibrates, noting that his presence is becoming more intimidating by the second. He activates the blessing of the Blade God, and his eyes light up with a cold, predatory focus. The divine power settles in, preparing him for the clash. Nearby, Chloe lunges forward, her spear cutting a bright trail through the air. A monstrous fish demon roars, its maw lined with jagged teeth. The beast bites down on her weapon, but Chloe doesn't flinch, and her eyes flash with those signature, heart-shaped pupils. She's swarmed by more of the creatures, holding them back with raw strength. Her spear crackles with electric energy as she channels her power. With a massive burst of light, she sweeps through the enemies. She stops to catch her breath, panting heavily from the exertion. She looks over at the carnage, checking the status of her allies. The unnamed popular student is in bad shape, blood soaking through his uniform as he struggles to stay conscious. The academy announcer watches from the sidelines, sweating bullets as the situation spirals. A towering siren demon emerges from the shadows, radiating a suffocating purple aura. Kang stands his ground, the tiny sashimi knife looking ridiculous against such a titan. The sheer pressure is overwhelming. The siren winds up for a strike, her face twisted in a cruel, sharp-toothed grin. She unleashes a massive swing of her clawed hands, tearing through the air. A blast of energy erupts, but Kang is already moving. He keeps his eyes locked on the target, looking for the smallest opening. He slides low, narrowly avoiding a lethal strike that shatters the ground behind him. Springing into the air, he uses the momentum to close the distance. He's got one shot to cut it. The siren realizes too late that he's already inside her reach. A clean slash tears right through her torso. She's knocked back, the force of the hit sending shockwaves through the area. The impact leaves the ground cratered. The announcer is speechless, his eyes wide as he watches the underdog work. The siren recovers for a split second, her eyes glowing with pure rage. She lets out a blood-curdling screech that echoes across the battlefield. Her body starts to fragment, the damage from the sashimi knife far worse than it looks. Kang delivers the final chunk, his blade slicing through the demon's core. He hits the ground with a heavy thud, sliding into a defensive stance. With a final leap, he puts distance between himself and the vanishing monster, threat neutralized. Kang dives into the fray, his sashimi knife cutting a glowing trail through the air. He hits the surface with a massive splash, sending water flying in every direction. He skids across the rocky ground, barely keeping his balance, struggling to read the demon's movements even with his system active. He grits his teeth, realizing the gap in speed is wider than he anticipated, knowing one wrong move and it's over. Chloe watches from the sidelines, clutching her microphone, hardly believing he's still standing. Nearby, the unnamed popular student lies defeated on the ground, his body fading as he's pushed to his limit. Kang catches his breath, a small, confident smirk forming on his face despite the danger. Chloe is completely thrown off, not understanding how he can stay so calm in a life-or-death situation. He doesn't give her an answer, dashing forward. Again, with a sudden burst of speed, he weaves through a flurry of dark energy slashes, his movements looking more like a dance than a fight. Chloe stares at him, her eyes wide with a new kind of admiration, since to her, he finally looks like a true hero. The sheer intensity of his focus is mesmerizing, and she can't look away. A memory of a conversation back at the academy flashes through her mind, where she used to lecture him on what it meant to be a hero. She had complained that even at a prestigious school, nobody seemed to have the real qualities of justice and courage. Back then, they both watched the popular kids from afar, students who were always surrounded by fans, living in a completely different world. The popular student would just laugh it off, enjoying the spotlight without a second thought. Chloe had been frustrated, feeling like the title of hero was being wasted on people who didn't care. Kang had just dismissed it all, saying he'd never want the burden of being a hero, though clearly he was lying to himself. Back in the present, Chloe can't stop staring, whispering his name, Geomma, in disbelief at the power he's showing. The siren demon roars, summoning more dark, fish-shaped projectiles that swarm the air. The projectiles zip toward Kang like homing missiles, trailing purple light. The siren hovers in the center of the dark energy, preparing for a massive finishing move. A massive explosion of purple light fills the sky, and it looks like the end. Kang twirls through the air, narrowly dodging the blast with a reckless mid-air spin. He spots the next wave of projectiles coming in and readies his blade since he's not done yet. He lands with a heavy thud, his eyes locked on the demon, the pressure suffocating, but he doesn't blink. The siren grins, her eyes glowing with a terrifying, sinister light, enjoying the hunt. She sweeps her claws down, leaving jagged slashes in the ground where Kang was standing just a second ago. Kang jumps onto floating chunks of stone, using them as stepping stones to gain height. He zooms past the projectiles, navigating the chaos with impossible precision. With a final, desperate push, he lunges toward the demon's head. The siren realizes he's closing in and lunges forward to meet him head-on. She bares her teeth, ready to tear him apart, but her expression suddenly shifts to surprise. Kang's blade is already moving too fast for her to block since he's found his opening. The other students watch in shock, their mouths hanging open as the low-tier student takes control of the fight. They can't believe what they're seeing since this shouldn't be possible. A blinding cross-shaped slash cuts through the demon, trailing pink energy. Chloe wonders if the siren was targeting them all along, or if she was just a lure for this exact moment. Kang drops from the air, his blade delivering a finishing blow that cuts deep into the demon's chest. He grits his teeth, putting every last bit of strength into the strike since this is it. The siren roars one last time, her body beginning to break apart under the force of the hit. A massive pillar of light erupts, consuming the demon entirely as it vanishes from the world. Victory his. A blinding beam of energy streaks across the sky, impacting the side of a distant mountain with devastating force. The mountain erupts in a colossal explosion of purple light and debris. The siren demon is caught in the middle of the blast, shrieking as the energy tears through its form. Nearby, two students gasp in terror, their faces pale as they witness the sheer scale of the destruction. The blue-haired student and the white-haired student look up at the smoking ruins of the peak, speechless. They stand in the pouring rain, their clothes soaked as they process the impossible power they just witnessed. The white-haired student wonders if anyone could have actually survived such a hit. The blue-haired student can only watch, her mouth slightly agape in awe. Rain falls steadily over the forest, the thunder of the blast still echoing through the trees. Near the crater, the student announcer stands over the unnamed popular student who sits slumped against the rocks, exhausted. The smaller fish demons, sensing the tide of battle has turned, shriek and scramble to escape into the shadows. The spear-wielding student watches them flee, her grip on her weapon tight as she remains on guard. Kang stands in the center of the devastated area, his breath hitching as he surveys the damage. He's frustrated that he hasn't landed a critical strike yet, knowing that protecting the others has hindered his movements. Suddenly, another massive explosion rocks the ground beneath his feet. Kang's eyes narrow as he realizes the monster is far from defeated, since it's coming back for more. The siren mermaid bursts from the rubble, her hair whipping around her as she radiates a terrifying dark aura. Kang drops into a low stance, his sashimi knives at the ready as he prepares for her next move. The student announcer and the spear-wielding student watch, paralyzed by the sheer malice of the demon. The spear-wielding student can only stare, realizing how outmatched they all are. The announcer looks on in grim silence, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding before them. Kang tightens his grip on his blades, since he only has 10 seconds left on his internal clock to end this. The siren lets out a blood-curdling shriek, her eyes glowing with a feral purple light. She lunges at Kang with incredible speed, her claws outstretched to tear him apart. Kang stands his ground, the air around him shimmering as a pillar of red energy rises behind him. He closes his eyes for a heartbeat, focusing every ounce of his power into his final strike. When his eyes snap open, they are glowing with a brilliant white intensity since he's in the zone. His focus is absolute since he's no longer just a student, he's a weapon. A silent, deadly promise hangs in the air that he will cut her down. Deep in the forest, a red-haired girl sprints through the rain-slicked trees. She's panting heavily, her school uniform soaked, but she refuses to slow down. She tells herself not to stop, her mind fixed on reaching the battlefield before it's too late. She leaps through the air, her hand on the hilt of her katana as she prepares to intervene. And this is Chloe. Her expression is one of intense worry, her thoughts consumed by the person she calls Geomma. She can't imagine the pain he must be going through right now, fighting a monster on his own. In her mind, she hears someone telling her to call for help, but her feet only move faster toward him. She remembers Kang as a figure of quiet strength, someone who stood tall even when the world was against him. To Chloe, he is the strongest person she's ever known, despite his humble appearance. Yet she recalls how he always seemed so reluctant to fight, as if he carried a weight she couldn't understand. He would avoid conflict whenever he could, staying in the shadows while others sought glory. He only drew his blade when there was no other choice left. And in those moments, his true power was finally revealed to those lucky enough to witness it. Chloe freezes, her breath hitching as she spots the silhouette of a mermaid-like demon amidst the swirling storm of dark magic. A thunderous explosion rocks the distant mountain peak, sending a shockwave through the forest that rattles the trees. She continues her desperate dash, sweat and rain stinging her eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs as she wonders about the explosion. Her resolve is fueled by a single thought as she whispers into the wind, begging Geomma to stay alive. Chloe stumbles, her body nearly buckling under the weight of her sheer exhaustion and the uneven ground. But she doesn't let herself fall, pushing forward with a burst of frantic energy as she leaps through the undergrowth. Her shoes screech against the slick earth as she rounds a corner, the sound of her heavy breathing echoing in her ears. She screams internally that she can't fall, that she can't stop running. Tears begin to mix with the raindrops on her face as she gasps that she has to find someone. She cries out to the empty woods for anyone at all, her voice cracking with desperation. She bursts into a small clearing, her voice a raw shout, asking if there is anyone there. A sudden, blinding flash of light cuts through the darkness, forcing her to squint as her world spins. Monstrous silhouettes emerge from the shadows, their fish-like features twisted into cruel snarls, and she screams that they are mermen. In her frantic state, Chloe lashes out at the first figure she sees, her mind unable to distinguish friend from foe. Her strike is parried by a massive blade, the sound of steel on steel ringing through the clearing. Chloe looks up through a veil of tears, stunned that someone has managed to block her desperate attack. The girl with the long teal hair looks back at her in surprise, her golden eyes wide as she recognizes the girl before her. Abel Von Nibelung stands firm, her heavy sword held effortlessly as she surveys the unexpected visitor. Chloe's strength finally gives out, and she collapses into the mud as Abel's group of fellow students gathers around. A blonde student nearby continues to fight off the mermen, shouting about an ambush and whether she just attacked them. The other students look down at the fallen girl with suspicion, saying she's not getting off the hook for this. Abel steps forward, her gaze softening as she looks at the trembling girl, telling them to hold on, that she knows her. Chloe's eyes flutter as she lies in the dirt, her voice a faint, desperate rasp, begging for help for Geomma. She can barely speak, her final strength spent as she begs for the one person who stayed behind to save them all. A student watches from the sidelines, eyes wide in disbelief at the spectacle unfolding in front of him. It's like watching a master chef at work, effortlessly slicing through everything in their path. Kang holds his small blade with clinical focus, since to him this powerful demon is nothing more than a fish on a cutting board. He's completely outclassing the Demonkin in the middle of combat. It's total domination, and he leaps through the air with zero hesitation. The witness can't look away, since this is the kind of sight that stays with you forever. Kang deflects a massive claw and keeps closing the distance. He moves in for the kill. A single strike is all it takes to carve right through the monster. It was a clean, inevitable result, and the demon falls apart in an instant. The outcome is final, with nothing left to do but watch the aftermath. Rachel and the other student stand paralyzed, trying to process the raw power they just witnessed. Rachel is the heir to a legendary spear saint lineage, but even she's mesmerized, hearts flashing in her eyes as she stares at him in awe. She can't believe it, since he's actually going to take down a high-tier mermaid demon on his own. Suddenly, she shouts a warning, but it's too late. A massive blast of energy hits the ground, throwing everyone back. Rachel snaps at her companion to stay sharp, since one distracted moment in a fight like this will get you killed. They scramble to their feet as the dust begins to settle. The other student realizes how lucky he was, since if that magic had connected, he wouldn't have survived. The mermaid is a high-level magic user, so even if Kang is winning now, the danger is far from over. Kang remains silent, his focus unbroken. He grips his knife and prepares for the next phase of the fight. The monster snarls, its eyes glowing with murderous intent. It unleashes its special attack, Needle Squall, launching a barrage of magical spikes at him. The creature lets out a piercing screech that echoes through the arena, carpeted in magical projectiles with nowhere left to hide. Needles rain down from every direction, tearing into the ground. The mermaid demon lunges forward, following up its barrage with a direct strike. A massive shockwave of energy cuts across the battlefield. Kang hits the ground running, dodging through the storm of spikes. He weaves through the magic with blinding speed. He starts slicing through the needles themselves, parrying every single one. Blood drips from his hand, but his expression doesn't change. He swings his blade in a wide, powerful arc. The blow connects with the force of a landslide. The monster's eyes widen in shock as its defense is shattered. A massive silhouette of energy looms behind Kang as he delivers the final blow. The Demonkin lets out a final agonizing scream. A bright arc of light splits the darkness, and it's over. Kang's gaze remains cold as he watches the monster fall. The demon is completely obliterated, dissolving into nothingness. Only its jagged grin remains for a split second before it vanishes forever. The mermaid demon lets out a final, agonizing scream as its body starts to break apart from the sheer force of the battle. It's not going down without a fight, funneling its remaining mana into its throat for one last attack. A massive, glowing orb of magic forms in its maw, ready to incinerate everything in its path. From the sidelines, Leon and Rachel scream for him to dodge, since they know no one should be able to survive a blast like that. Kang stares directly into the blinding light, knowing they're right, that he would dodge if he actually could. But he's locked in place since he has to settle this right here or it's over for everyone. Suddenly, the chaos around him fades away, and he finds himself standing in the middle of a vast, calm ocean under a white sky. It's a moment of absolute stillness amidst the storm of battle. He feels the cool water beneath his feet as he grounds himself, letting the distractions slip away. He reaches out, sensing the flow of energy through the world and focusing it into the palm of his hand. He knows what he has to do, since this isn't about raw power anymore, it's about the perfect execution. A blinding flash of light erupts as his mind and blade finally become one. Everything comes down to this one final moment, one final slash to end it all. He whispers a declaration of absolute destruction that if it stands in his way, it shall be cut. His eyes glow with a fierce red intensity as he pushes his synchronization to the limit. He readies his knife, since this tiny, humble blade is about to do something no one thought possible. He lunges forward, a blur of motion slicing through the void. A single, perfect line of light cuts through the very fabric of reality. The impact is absolute, since the space around the Demonkin is torn apart by the sheer force of the technique. He realizes the true nature of his gift, that he isn't just carving through flesh and bone, he's tearing a hole through the very mana the demon is using to fight back. He can cut through magic itself. Blood drips onto the cold stone as the massive strain of the attack takes its toll on his body. The mermaid demon's face is frozen in a mask of pure agony and defeat. Kang stands over the fallen creature, his presence towering over the wreckage of the battlefield. He's exhausted, every muscle in his body screaming from the effort, sweat and blood soaking through his clothes. The monster lets out one final, pitiful groan as the light leaves its eyes. Leon and Rachel can only watch in stunned silence, since they've never seen anyone move with that kind of precision. The demon's head rolls across the ground, and its body begins to crumble into dust. It's over, and Kang stands alone in the rain, the only one left standing among the carnage. Leon is speechless, unable to begin to wrap his head around the power he just witnessed. There's no doubt about it, since against all the odds, he won. Kang looks out over the battlefield, a silent protector in a doomed future. The adrenaline begins to fade, and the true extent of his injuries starts to set in. He doubles over, a violent cough racking his chest and splashing blood onto the cracked ground. He collapses, his body finally giving out after being pushed far past its breaking point, his knife clattering to the stone. Rachel screams his name and rushes toward him, with Leon following close behind in a panic. The scene shifts abruptly to the Academy's star student, the golden hero, on his knees in defeat while Leon stands over him. Leon looks up, his expression one of pure shock and immediate urgency. Something has caught his eye, and it's clear the situation is spiraling out of control. They don't wait another second, dashing through the dark tunnel toward the light at the end. Leon turns sharply, his eyes widening as he realizes help has finally arrived. He lets out a heavy sigh of relief, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. Abel Von Nibelung leads the group, her golden eyes scanning the gruesome scene with a cold, analytical gaze. The students are horrified by the severed remains of the Demonkin littering the battlefield, while Rachel stays close to the fallen Kang. Rachel cradles Kang's head, her face etched with worry as she tries to assess his injuries. She pulls him into a tight embrace, sobbing his name in a desperate plea for him to wake up. Abel watches the display with a narrowing gaze, a flash of annoyance crossing her face. She questions the necessity of such a close, public display of affection amidst the carnage. The unnamed popular student offers a light, dismissive laugh, seemingly unfazed by the surrounding death. Abel remains silent, her focus shifting between the golden boy and the tragedy before them. The group gathers, the air thick with the scent of blood and the sound of falling rain. Leon vents his frustration, cursing the instructors for their gross negligence in surveying the island. Abel's expression hardens, since the presence of a mermaid demonkin in a safe zone is a grave oversight. She confronts Leon, her voice sharp and demanding answers. Leon responds with a mocking chuckle, his eyes